Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well. In this video, we're going to take a look at the chart of Bitcoin, especially the most recent action of the price of Bitcoin, and ask ourselves what it's potentially telling us. And also, we're going to take a look at this particular pattern on the chart of Bitcoin and ask ourselves what happens if this pattern actually plays out. And I'm going to explain to you what this particular data is telling us as well. Join me. Alright guys, welcome back. So we got a lot to talk about today in this video, especially the weekly chart on Bitcoin. Before I start though, if you're watching my video for the first time and you have no idea why I'm wearing this around my neck, essentially it's not a seat belt, it is actually my arm sling that I'm wearing still for protection and comfort. Okay, let's talk about Bitcoin. So you may recall in my previous video on Bitcoin, I said, look, the fact that Bitcoin has gone above this weekly 21 EMA, the blue line you see there, the fact that Bitcoin has managed to climb above that level is a positive sign, it's a good sign. Because usually when price manages to recover and get back above its weekly 21 EMA, usually it's a sign that the uptrend could potentially continue. It's a bullish sign, essentially. And we also said that as long as Bitcoin continues to remain above the weekly 21 EMA, the blue line, then the balance of probabilities favors the bulls. It favors a potential uptrend continuation towards 100,000, likely by the start of next year. Now, here's a question you're probably wondering right now. Just recently, in the past week, we had Bitcoin dropping down and testing that weekly 21 EMA. As you can see from that red bar, price of Bitcoin dropped down, fell to the 21 weekly EMA, close to it, approximately the 43,000 level, and has managed to just bounce from that level at the moment. Now here's the question. The bottom line is, what happens if Bitcoin drops below and closes below the weekly 21 EMA? When I say close, I'm talking about the candle bar, the actual weekly price bar. What happens if the price of Bitcoin, it's an if by the way, what happens if the price of Bitcoin drops below the weekly 21 EMA and then closes below it? What does history tell us about what usually happens to Bitcoin in that scenario, in that situation? Well, what I did was I did some research on this and I found some interesting data, which I will share with you in just a few moments. Take a look at this chart. Essentially what I'm asking is this. What happens when Bitcoin follows this pattern? The pattern is, what happens when Bitcoin is above its weekly 21 EMA, then drops below it, then climbs and rallies back above it again, and then fails and closes back below it again? By the way, notice what Bitcoin has done in the past few months. It was above its 21 weekly EMA back in the month of April, for example. It dropped below its 21 weekly EMA in the month of May, then rallied back above it in the past few weeks, and then it dropped and tested. It touched that weekly 21 EMA. The question I'm asking is, what happens if the price of Bitcoin were to drop and close below the 21 weekly EMA? What does history tell us? Okay, let's take a look at this data. So what I did was I looked back as far as Bitcoin chart goes, all the way back to 2012, and notice what we found. I'm going to show you what Bitcoin usually does after 1 month, then after 3 months, and then after 6 months. Okay, guys? So again, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. So what this table is telling us, that historically, only twice in history, and that was back in 2012 and 2013, has the result being positive when this pattern has happened. Again, the pattern I'm talking about is when the price fails to stay above the weekly 21 EMA and then drops and closes back below it again. This is what the historical data is telling us. So back in 2012 and 2013, the result was positive. Here is, for example, what happened in 2012. For example, as you can see here, within 1 month and then 6 months later, the price managed to recover and rally higher again. The same happened in 2013. The result was positive. But guys, we got some bad news here. Those two positive results were the exception to the rule. In fact, the majority of the time, as you can see here from this table, the majority are all reds. So 80% of the time, when Bitcoin fails to stay above the weekly 21 EMA and drops below it, it actually sees further follow through lower. In other words, we see more drawdowns, more losses in the first month and especially in the 6 months afterwards. Again, as you can see from this table here, in the past, when Bitcoin has failed to remain above the weekly 21 EMA after rallying back above it again, usually when price fails to remain above the weekly 21 EMA and goes and closes below it again, we see further drawdowns and further losses in the first month. In fact, you can see the median figure. Look at the yellow level. That's the median figure. The median figure shows within the first month, usually the median risk, the median drawdown is about 16%, minus 16.8%. In other words, guys, the median risk and the median drawdown and losses is about 17% lower. That's within the first month, within the first 30 days. Within 3 months, the result is not that bad. It's about 0.7%. But guys, within 6 months, within the next 6 months, the result is even worse. You can see the median figure, the median risk, and the median drawdown is about minus 36.6%. About a 37% risk or drawdown. Again, if you look at the risk rates, the risk rate within the first month is 80%, within 3 months is 50%, and within 6 months is about 70%. So what this means is that statistically, whenever Bitcoin has rallied back above its 21 weekly EMA, and then fails to remain above it and drops back below it and closes below it again, statistically we see a median risk and drawdown of another 16% lower within the first month, the first 30 days. And actually much more than that, about 37% loss or risk within the next 6 months. So as you can see here, guys, there are actually much more reds, much more negatives than there are positives. Let me give you an example back in 2018. As you may remember, back in 2018, the price of Bitcoin dropped below its 21 weekly EMA, then managed to recover back above it. As you can see here, it recovered above it, but it failed to stay above it and dropped back below it. It closed below the 21 weekly EMA, and then we saw further drawdowns. By the way, it tried one more time. It tried several times to go above its 21 weekly EMA, and each time in 2018 it failed to stay above it and then dropped back below it, and it fell even lower. There was more drawdowns in the weeks to come, as you can see here on this chart. The same pattern happened in 2014, as you can see here. In 2014, price of Bitcoin dropped below the 21 weekly EMA, recovered and went back above it. Then it failed to remain above it. It dropped back below it again, and it actually dropped even lower. As you can see here in these two occasions, you see here in 2014. So guys, going back to our chart of Bitcoin right now. As long as Bitcoin can remain above the 21 weekly EMA and bounce strongly from this level, then the odds favor more bullishness in the months to come. So for example, if Bitcoin follows this pattern you're seeing here, so in this model, if the price of Bitcoin goes above the 21 weekly EMA, then pulls back to the 21 weekly EMA and then bounces from that level, bounces strongly from that level, then the results are actually quite good. Historically, what usually follows are positive results, more bullishness in the months ahead. So that's the best case scenario for Bitcoin. If the price of Bitcoin can remain above the 21 weekly EMA and bounces strongly from this level, then statistically the next few months could be quite good for Bitcoin. So basically what history is telling us is that if Bitcoin is going to succeed and be able to move towards the 100,000 level in the next several months by the start of the new year, then it must remain above its weekly 21 EMA. However, if the price of Bitcoin fails to remain above the 21 weekly EMA and follows this pattern, in other words, if it drops and closes below the 21 weekly EMA, then as we can see from this data on our charts, the results are usually negative. Within the first month, we see a median of minus 17%, and then in the next 6 months, we usually see even more drawdowns, more risk in the next 6 months. Again, of course, these are probabilities, they're not certainties. So it's possible that Bitcoin may not follow the usual pattern. It might follow a positive pattern, like in 2012 and 2013. All I'm saying is that historically and statistically, the results have not been good if the price of Bitcoin fails to remain above the 21 weekly EMA. Again, we'll have to see what happens in the next few weeks. The question is, can the price of Bitcoin remain above the 21 weekly EMA or not? And by the way, everything I said in this video can apply to XRP as well. So if XRP also drops below its weekly 21 EMA, then downside risk also increases for XRP, and we might see potential lower levels. Now, let me just say this. A lot can depend, I think, on the stock markets, on the S&P, because what usually happens on the stock markets, as we've seen in the past, can have an impact on Bitcoin as well, because there's usually a positive correlation between Bitcoin and the stock markets. So guys, I'm going to do a video also very soon on the stock markets, on the S&P very soon. So make sure you watch that. It's going to be very interesting. All right, guys, thank you very much indeed. I look forward to seeing you in the next video update. Cheers. Bye now.